Gustavo, welcome back.
Hello, Miriam. How are you?
I am very well. 100 episodes later, I have the honor to have you back.
Yeah, you didn't get rid of me, right? And I'm so excited to be here. I mean, I really enjoyed the first time we talked, and then we interacted in so many things. We facilitated things together. It was so fun that I'm glad to be here.
Yes, and I think the audience cannot get enough of you.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Yes. So on episode 26, we talked about meetings and how to have better meetings. And today we discussed that we want to explore some paradoxes, and namely the paradox of psychological safety in organizations. So maybe you can just start with a warm-up. Where do you see the paradox in when it comes to psychological safety in organizations?
I'm going to step back first. And I was thinking this morning, oh, we have this recording coming up. And one of the things that's happening is psychological safety is becoming the new agile or the new design thinking or the new innovation or the new whatever. It's becoming a buzzword. So of course, most of the work we do that has to do with culture design and helping teams build their culture, clients always understand they need to basically build psychological and promote psychological safety. But later on, everyone's reaching out. I need psychological safety. We want to it becomes like what are you talking about? And that's the biggest thing that before we get into the paradox, because when I start asking, what do you mean? They say, well, this thing that is important. Amy Edmondson, people like, as usual, they read the headline and then they just, I want that. Give me 1 pound or 1 kilogram of psychological safety. The paradox itself is...
And maybe, sorry to interrupt you.
No, please.
But I'm grateful that you slow down. So before we get into the paradox, now it's my time to push the brake. Let's first explore, what does psychological safety actually mean? And what do those individuals who shout, I want that, we need that, what do they think it means? Or what do they expect through psychological safety to happen?
Cool. People are looking for band-aids, unfortunately, and doing psychological safety, it's about doing a lot of inner work. So psychological safety is the belief that one's team is safe for us to take interpersonal risks. That means, in plain English, I can be myself, I can speak up, I can say what I think, I can share my ideas in the open, I can challenge groupthink, which is critical, and I can even challenge the status quo or my boss, okay? So that's great. One thing that people confuse, and they use the terms interchangeably, trust is different. Trust happens between two people, So I trust you, you trust me, that's why we're here. Psychological safety is something that the whole team provides to every team member. It's a collective belief, And in that regards, I always use like those safety nets, that someone's going to take the leap and everyone's holding that. Imagine like the firefighters. Everyone needs to hold that tight. So when the person jumps, then it can bounce back until they land safely and can. But if one of the participants basically says, I'm going to hold it, then it can twist and that person can basically bounce in the wrong direction. So that's one thing. The other thing that's important is, and I don't want to be critical here, but Amy Edmondson, who coined the term, she's a Harvard professor. She was working with Google. Google was on the quest of finding what makes or breaks high-performing teams. They went through different iterations, having the best professionals you can hire or pay for, right? They went through different, more diversity, people that like to work together, people that embrace conflict, whatever. And then they came working with Amy Edmondson, that psychological safety was one of the key ingredients, for team success. That's why people are asking for it, because I want that, give me. The only thing I kind of disagree a little bit, she emphasizes the role of the leader.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's a paradox. One of the first paradox, like if you say that it's a collective thing that everyone contribute to, why are we putting all the emphasis on the leader to make it happen? Because then it believes that, oh, the leader gives it to you or doesn't give it to you. It's like empowerment. I hate that word, because you don't need to empower women. You don't need to empower minorities. They're already powerful. As a leader, you need to remove from the equation and let them do what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to give them freedom and you need to give them authority. So when it comes to psychological safety, once again, it's something that the team creates. And this connects to the other topic that we want to discuss, which is subcultures. So I work in companies before being a consultant as a CEO of a team, and the CEO of the larger organization was promoting a culture that was anything but safe. But we were able to create in our smaller pond a safe environment. And it wasn't just because of me, it was everyone
contributing. Because one individual can actually poison the sense of psychological safety. And at the end, it's a sense. Do I feel safe? Yes or no? It's not a trust is more of a decision, isn't it? Whereas psychological safety is an environment in which I walk in.
It's a cultural thing, no? So it's an environment. You're right. The thing about there's an exercise I do when we did a retreat with a team in person after 18 months of being here on Zoom all day. And we did an exercise that we asked people to use like a thread to connect each other, like building those relationships between the team. And then they have to create a web, so you can put the phone on top of it and make sure it doesn't fall, right? It's a precious thing. You don't want to destroy it. And then the thing that we ask is one team member to start playing around with the thread to see what happens, and then another. So the point is, if there are 2 members out of 10, like maybe they're disengaged, they are maybe troublemakers, whatever, the team can still be stable enough. But when the majority of people are moving their threads, then things collapse. No? So I think that, to your point, one person might poison, but the team should be stronger enough than one member if it's the right. No? So a psychological safety environment is not either 100% in or you're out. There's a degree from low to high. That's one thing that I always talk about. It's not that you have or you have not. No, you have different degrees from low to medium to high. And there are things I use like a ladder to talk about the different stages of psychological safety. And I always use the metaphor, you need to climb the ladder to move from one place to another. But one thing that could happen is you can fall, no? Because so it's a two-way street in that direction. No? You can go up, but also you can go down. So you need to nurture it constantly.
Yes, and isn't it the leader at the end who sets the tone of that? Because what I'm thinking is psychological safety, also as you defined it, means feeling secure enough to take risks and to challenge the status quo. Yes. And I think also trusting that I will receive radical candor feedback, for instance, so that it's not this touchy-feely kumbaya environment where we are all friends, but it's safe enough to also criticize each other on a professional level. And I think if the leader doesn't role model that, it cannot emerge from the team, or can it?
It all depends. Let me step back again. First, you brought a great point. People, especially when I talk to CEOs, and you mentioned the word safe, no? They feel, what is this? I'm going to be overprotective. No, that's not the point. Is you feel safe to jump. You feel safe to take risk. You safe. It's about promoting a positive friction between the team members. It's not about we all love each other. It's not about being friends. You can have a good relationship, and actually research shows that when you have a strong interpersonal relationship with your colleagues, teamwork happens. So it's important, the human bonding, but you're not supposed to like people. You're not supposed to be their friends. You're supposed to respect them because of who they are, because of you're supposed to respect their different perspectives, their backgrounds, their ideas. Not because they are different to yours, they are not valid. So going back to the leader, I think it's not a black or white kind of question. I'm not saying the leader doesn't have a role. It plays a big, big role. My approach, and many people love it, and people say, oh, what are you talking about? Is that in the past, we put a lot of emphasis on leaders, very paternalistic organizations. Basically, it all depends on daddy or mommy is going to save, they're going to save the world. In today's environment, people play a key role. So you shouldn't wait for the leader to do things, but you should start being a part of that culture. So it works both ways. We need grown-ups that are rebels, not just rebel like teenagers that rebel because they don't want to do things, but people that rebel with accountability. So they rebel because they have a purpose to help the company grow, and they have an accountability that, okay, I'm going to do things my way, but I'm going to take the consequences.
And because they understand the context and have the expertise to rebel.
Exactly. Take, for example, what happened during COVID. No, so leaders were completely clueless. No, I know people don't want to hear this, but they were lost because they didn't have an instruction manual to deal with a pandemic. They were not prepared to deal with such a crisis, except for very few people. They didn't know. Many people were fighting, have been fighting, working from home because it's not going to happen. And now not only they had to embrace it, but they didn't have an option. So they adopted a model without conviction, but with necessity. So they have the push to say. So most organizations succeeded not because of their leaders. In many cases, the leader contributed, but because people were able to find solutions. They were able to support each other like team members and say, hey, Miriam, I have tech issues. I have this. And people started like finding the ways around as subcultures to how to deal with the pandemic. That's why now over 80 something of people either don't want to return to the office, or if they do, they just want to go 2 or 3 days a week at the most. What do leaders say? 95% want everyone back at the office.
Yeah.
So is that a safe environment? Is that understanding? So I trusted you when I didn't have a chance, and you did okay, and you delivered, and you work a lot, and you kill yourself, and you metaphorically and basically you burn out because you try to help us succeed. And now that things are settling a little bit, I don't trust you anymore.
And I wonder whether this has actually to do with the trust towards the colleagues, or whether insecurities in the leaders. Because as I have observed it, for individual or team members to suddenly work from home, they know what they have to do. They have their networks and they can seek for information quite quickly. And they had to be independent before. The leaders usually goes like shouting to the other office next door to the PA and asking her to print out stuff, to check something, to call someone. So to have someone constantly at disposal because they couldn't deal with all the complexity or the overload. So maybe their ask for everyone to come back to the office is just to create their safe environment for themselves, where they have access to the information without needing to invest this insecurity of having to call someone and to admit, I don't know, writing an email, can you please search for this information? Can you please set up this Zoom call because I still don't know how to deal with the tech?
Yeah, that's a great observation, and I agree. I mean, they lose the power of being in control, that people go to their office, no? I want Miriam here, bring her, and Miriam, yes, boss, what do you want? Now we have a Zoom call. We are all like a little rectangle on the, we're all like, and to your point, they have to print on their own house. They have to do everything unless they ask their kids or spouses to do that for them, you know? And that's an issue. And also there's lack of trust on themselves first as leaders. So I'm going to still be respected and treated as the leader when I'm just another rectangle on a Zoom call. If people don't see me all the time, are they going to basically value my role, or I'm going to become accessory, an accessory? And there's another thing that many leaders confuse presentism. No, I need to see my people with people that basically are going to be rewarded or promoted or whatever, versus focusing on the outcome. Mm-hmm. I don't care when people do the work, how many hours they work, if they're delivering great work.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then I wonder whether it's then the psychological safety that actually the leaders need more for themselves and not so much for their teams. Because then also to tie it back to the subcultures or subgroups, for a team member, they have access to their mates and they create their subcultures. And there it's easier to create psychological safety, access to information, everything that we need to work well together. But if you're outside of it, then maybe you only have one link or very loose links to the rest of the team.
The rest of the team, yeah. I mean, what I was thinking when you were sharing that insight is what happened to Apple. You know, Apple forced employees, or tried to force employees back to the office, and people rebelled in a positive way. They didn't say, no, we don't want to. They came back with solutions, with whatever. So that's why I'm saying that we need to stop thinking that the leader is the one who she or he is going to say, look, this is what's going to happen. This is what, like, and we need to tap into the collective wisdom. We hire 10,000, 20,000 employees because they are smart. Well, why don't we ask them? Why don't we tap into their ideas, not just into one person's thinking?
Absolutely. So how can leaders then create psychological safety for themselves?
Well, going back to, if we stay in the definition, first, I think they need to trust themselves. And I think there's a lot of self-confidence issues. Tasha Eurich did a lot of research on self-awareness. And basically she discovered that most people believe, 90% of people believe they are self-aware, but only few are. When it comes to leaders, and especially male and higher position, that's even worse. You know, the percentage that believe they are self-aware is super, super high. And the ones who are not are actually 2%, or who are 2%. So what happens there is basically, if you don't start by understanding your blind spots, the things you don't know, how are you going to lead? No? And I think that's one of the things that there's a lot of inner work. We talk about the paradox of psychological safety. You know, I always tell people it's like chicken or egg. We're going to do, for example, I build like a canvas that's called the Uncover the Stinky Fish. No? Mm-hmm. And it has like 4 quadrants, and basically stinky fish is the problems that, because we carry over, they start to smell and until they rot. The issue is that small problem actually gets everything contaminated. So if you have a rotten fish in your fridge, the milk is going to get bad, the cream, the butter, the produce, everything that's in the fridge. So it's important to take care of it. When we start using this tool and many others, people say, well, but first we need to build psychological safety, because if not, people are going to feel uncomfortable. I say, well, it's like chicken and egg. At some point, we are going to have to talk about the stinky fish. At some point, we need to start talking about the issues and our emotions, our mindsets, and the behaviors that are getting in the way. So you have to cross the line. You know what I mean? Of course, there are facilitation ways, and we can talk about that later if you want, but on how to do it. But you cannot fix lack of psychological safety without crossing certain lines and making people feel uncomfortable. It's the price you have to pay.
And I think, yeah, as you said, it is like a chicken and egg, because in order to address these issues, we need psychological safety. But psychological safety is created by addressing these issues and seeing that we will survive doing that.
Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it.
And I So one thing that just crossed my mind is maybe we got the story of psychological safety wrong altogether. So instead of looking at the leader, as you said, that's wrong to look at the leader and expect him or her to provide psychological safety to the team. Maybe it's actually the task of the team to provide psychological safety to the leader so that they know, okay, I can be human. I can involve the team and ask them. I can trust them and share responsibility. And thereby it becomes a nurturing ground to even foster the psychological safety and team performance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So maybe it's time to just acknowledge that our leaders are human.
Indeed.
And I think this is something that is often forgotten, actually, especially because up there, it's getting very lonely.
And gold. Yeah, I mean, you nailed it again. I think that once again, it's not one or the other, but I think that we need to stop putting so much emphasis on leaders. First, because then it's easy, no? It's like it makes it an easy way out for team leaders, no? Because when I do interviews before starting a culture design project with a client, people start blaming the leaders. When I interview the leaders, the formal leaders, no, they say, well, the people don't do this. I say, well, but let's forget about finger pointing. What can you do better? And the same with people. No? So I push back and stop blaming to someone else. I use this 50-50 rule, which is every time there's a problem between two people, each has 50% of the responsibility. I don't care if it's 50, because the moment you divide the problem in equal parts, you have to focus on what's my half that I need to fix versus, well, Miriam, it's because of you. If you don't fix this, I'm not, no. And in that regards, I think that the pressure that leaders need to be more human, but also they need to fix things. They need to provide psychological safety. They don't have a clue because they weren't trained on that in business school. It adds more pressure. So rather than opening their mind to do it, they shut down. So it's even worse, creates the opposite effect. From a team standpoint, it makes it easier because people say, well, if my leader doesn't do this, then, and I say, well, you're a grown-up, going back to the grown-up rebels, you're being paid a lot of money. I was facilitating an executive team retreat. All people were C-level, right? And at some point I had to tell them, and of course, this is at my own risk as a consultant, because they can say, we don't want to work with you because no. And I say, guys, you are behaving like a middle management team. Stop waiting for the CEO to fix everything. You are their direct, you're the tribe. You should be also doing stuff. You have issues with what the CEO is doing. Have you ever told this person that? No, well, I'm afraid. I say, well, so it's easy to bend in the, when people say the water cooler is great for team building, I would say, no, the water cooler is the worst thing of culture happens because people get after the meeting around the coffee machine or the water cooler and they start talking, criticizing each other. And so we need to own our part too, It's like I tell my kids, yeah, we as parents need to make sure that we provide the right environment for you to grow and whatever, but also what about you? What are you doing? And if you see something that you feel that my own behavior or my wife's own behavior is not the right one, well, speak up. Don't just criticize. Or do you have any idea? What can we do better? What would you do?
Yeah. But then again, we run into the problem so you spoke up. So you felt either safe enough or at least brave enough to speak up, despite the risk that they might say, how do you speak to us? We fire you. We don't want you to be our consultant anymore. But for this to happen, for team members to speak up and say, okay, I am willing to own my half, and this is my half, but this is what I observe what's not working. Isn't it psychological safety that we need there?
Yeah, but once again, where do you get started? You need to start it. You need to start. It's not saying, hey guys, here's psychological safety. There. Now you have to do the inner work, and it takes courage from the leader, right? But also it takes courage from people. And I always tell people, like when we're doing brainstorming, finding a new idea, and they say, well, now give me the idea that you're willing to lose your job for.
I love that.
When they say no, they say, we're going to pick one idea. Are you willing to sacrifice you put your job at risk because you think your idea is so great? I mean, entrepreneurs, they start a company and they quit their jobs too because they believe in their idea. So when they work in a company, everyone says, this idea is great. My boss doesn't see the value. Stupid. What I say, okay, are you willing to put your job at risk because of this idea? Oh, no. I say, well, then it's not good, or you're not convinced. Either way, it's not going to work. If the idea is not good, it's going to kill. And if you have a good, not so good idea, but you're not convinced, it's never going to go anywhere.
That's a really good one.
Want to change things, we need to stop going back to that relationship. We need to stop thinking as leaders as superheroes, and we need to stop thinking about employees as victims of ugly leaders. You know what I mean? Because it's giving people an easy way out. I blame an individual. When they say people don't leave jobs, they leave bad leaders. I say, well, but I've spoken up my whole career since I was 18 and started working. I remember I was 21. I was put in front of a CEO of a global company, multi-billion company, and the guy started saying to me, I say, hey, hello. And I challenged his thoughts, and no one told me, nothing's going to happen to you. I just say it, and the guy looked at me, almost crushed me. But then at some point he said, well, I think you're right. I'm going to sit about that. And my boss looked at me and said, oh. Yeah, but on another point, I lost my job once. I was the CEO of a company, and I went to the chairman. He wanted to play politics and make me do something I didn't want. And I draw a line, and off you go. And I say, well, but we talk a lot about purpose, we talk about values, a lot of things, but then people don't act on them. So I think that psychological safety also connects to that, who you want to be as a person. So you want to stay silent and be a bystander and see things. I mean, when someone is sexually harassing an employee, or they are discriminating, or they're being assholes, or they're being disrespectful, or they're being whatever, are you doing something as a team member, or you're just saying that? I'm going to give you an example. I was working with a large bank in this country. I'm not going to name them. I'm not going to mention the name, of course. And I've been working for many months with a team of very, very senior executives. Project, super excitement, being tested, everything was in the right direction until, well, now we need the final buy-in from the ex-CEO, I don't know. Boom. And the people were scared. We're not talking about interns, entry-level employees. We're talking about very senior people, right? People with 20 plus years of experience, earning millions of dollars, whatever. They were scared about dealing with their boss. So I say, guys, what's going to happen? Well, if she pushes back, and basically what I'm going to do on my own, I say, well, that's the point. Psychological safety is the power of the team. So I told them, like, every time you're going to have a conversation about this project, don't address it on an individual standpoint. Go together. If she calls you because you're the head of technology, bring the chief of marketing officer, or bring whoever all together. And if she wants to kill it, say, we're all going to resign. Are you willing to do that? And they did. They didn't resign. They did. You know what? We stand by this together. We're a team. And then at some point she said, you know what? I never seen a team that are so convincing. So I'm not seeing what you're seeing, but probably it's my fault. Go ahead with the project.
Awesome.
So the team builds psychological safety to confront their manager together.
And I wonder whether two things came to my mind. One is the concept of integrity. I rarely hear or read about integrity in the corporate world. So meaning that I say what I do and I do what I say. And I think if we would show more integrity, this creates trust and psychological safety eventually, because we get this certainty. I think safety, when we think of the human brain, we feel unsafe if we don't know, if we're afraid.
Yeah.
We're afraid of something maybe we cannot even put our finger on. And I find it striking, that's the second thing, I find it striking that adults are afraid of speaking up, afraid of their, air quotes, leader. So how can we shift the focus in this conversation, in this public conversation, from buzzwords like psychological safety to a key concept of being human and a reliable team member, of integrity?
Honesty, no? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I haven't read a single article about integrity in the workplace.
Yeah.
Have you? You read more than I do.
Eh?
You read more than I do.
No, I read and I wrote about something about that, but yeah. I think there's inconsistency between what people say and what people do, and that's one of the key things of psychological safety. Because I prefer a boss to say, you know what, I'm gonna make the final call. No, whatever you guys recommend, it's gonna be on me. Perfect. That's safer than a boss saying, no, your opinion counts. We want to hear what, and then he's gonna do whatever. So be honest.
Yeah.
Yesterday, someone asked me to record a video. They're working with the cultural design canvas, the tool I have for mapping the culture. They're working with our global team, and they asked me to send a video to encourage the people. So it was hard to say, well, I'm going to say, hey guys, go do it. No, that kind of thing. So I thought about exactly that, honesty. And I told them, look, the only advice I can give you, be honest. When you're mapping your current culture, what's the current culture of your team or your company? Be honest. Don't bullshit yourself. When you agree where you want to take the future state of your culture, be honest. Don't commit to things you're not going to be able to deliver. When you are reviewing your own behavior, how are you living and bringing and modeling that culture? Be honest about it. No? When you commit to the changes you're going to make, be honest. Don't bullshit your team members. So I think that sometimes it's better to agree on 5% incremental changes, being honest and delivering, than promising things. I mean, trust and psychological safety the same. Deliver on what you promise.
Mm.
No? There are two types of trust, and this connects to psychological safety. One trust is more head trust or a rational trust, which is Miriam capable of running a podcast? Does she know how to ask the question? Is her microphone going to work? Is she going to show on time? All the things that are more operational. And then there's an emotional trust. No, so when I'm not here, no, I go and fix a glass of water, and Miriam stays with the audience. Is she going to start talking trash about me? Is she going to, oh my God, this guy? You know what I mean? So these are the two things that happen in the team. Do I trust my colleagues that they're going to do a good job, basically performing their role as a designer, as a QA analyst, whatever they do? Are they going to do it great? Do they have the skills? That's one part. And the second part is that person going to have my back?
Mm.
You know, so that's the thing that we need to do. If you don't deliver on the goods when it comes to the functional side of your role, then people are going to trust you with their heart because you don't know how to do your job. But doing your job gives you one part of the trust. The other part is more emotional. It's more of a person. Are you trustworthy as a human being, not just as a professional?
Yes. And this brings two things to my mind. One is the importance of the inner work, and you mentioned that before, is this insecurity of us humans. Fear of rejection, imposter syndrome, fear of being judged. And if I have this insecurity in myself, I will always project it on others. So I will see clues for my inability to run a podcast. Oh, I saw him smiling. Oh, and now he's drinking a sip of water. That's because I said something stupid. So he's making fun of me. but this is only happening in my own head. It has nothing to do with what you're actually saying. And I think, so there's this individual responsibility to make sure that we are dealing with our own shit first, because we will eventually project it on others, and this will impact our performance, but also the safety of the group. Because if I'm constantly into defense mode, then I'm not open to new ideas. And with that comes then the connection, the emotional connection between team members. And I'm not talking kumbaya, I'm talking about a deeper level of trust, that if two human beings don't connect to each other on a human level, they will never be able to hear each other's words. If I'm afraid of you, my brain is so busy with making sure that you won't kill me that I cannot listen to what you're actually saying.
Absolutely. And I like the idea of what's in our head. You know, sometimes I tell people, like, ask, you know, don't operate under assumptions. So you think that there are persons laughing at you or doesn't care about your idea or is dismissing your thoughts. Ask. Maybe you're wrong, maybe you're right, maybe the person didn't realize, or maybe they are busy or they're so worried that it's not about you. No? So when it's personal, it hurts. Ask questions is very important. One thing we do when we're working with building psychological or promoting with the teams, that's why I always tell them, like, you cannot do it without the effort, without the inner work, and without going through very uncomfortable path. This is gonna hurt. If it doesn't hurt, you're not growing. It's like your body when you're a teenager and start the bones not to stretch well, it hurts. I can remember that happened many decades ago, but you know, you get the point. I was running an event with a session with a team, and even though I always clarify, if you hire me and I'm gonna, my team, and we're gonna be facilitating the experience, we need to have the floor, we need to have the room, because things are gonna happen and we know how to deal. And at some point we're gonna create a little bit of, a lot of discomfort on purpose. And at some point there was a person that didn't want to participate in a very simple exercise that everyone was sharing. And I started pushing nicely, say, well, okay, we want to hear from you. Oh, well, maybe later. I say, well, this is the time. No, everyone's sharing. If you don't share, first, people are not going to understand who you are or where you're coming from, but also they're going to feel that you don't trust them. No, everyone open up, and if you don't want to, so it's going to backfire. And the CEO jumped. Well, you know, you shouldn't pushing her. No, and she started trying to protect the employee. And that creates an even and safer environment. It's like another thing that people don't want to talk about. I hate, maybe it's a very bold word, but the anonymous thing, you know? We're going to send, when companies, you were talking about ethical crisis and lack of issues, no, with companies, we're going to send an anonymous survey. Say, well, anonymity, except for very special things, that there's maybe people are stealing money or there's sexual harassment or very sensitive topics, it sends the message that the culture is not safe. So we're going to keep it, we're not going to tell who says what, because, you know, so we are sending the message that it's not safe, so it backfires. On their hand, most anonymous surveys, they only open doors for people that are really disgruntled or that are not happy or whatever, to throw more shit into the company rather to actually open up. Because once again, if I have an issue with you, or you with me, or you with Tom or Martha, whoever, you need to start discussing issues with the people that you have the problem, not sending it to HR. Yeah. Talking about, let's remove leadership. No? The team members need to address their issues in the open, not with the leader or HR being involved.
Yeah. And this brings me back to something you mentioned earlier, is don't assume, but ask questions. And I think the art and culture of asking questions is fundamental, because also in the survey, if you don't have the ability to ask a question about the survey results, it's very difficult to interpret it, because again, we don't know what's hidden between the lines. How many misunderstandings do we have with people so close to us as our partners, our family members? We send text messages and then we get a huge fight because we interpret something into their words that it's not there. How come we assume that this doesn't happen when we read survey results? So the information we're reading has, I would say 90% nothing to do with the information that has actually been sent. So I think in order to create then this culture of psychological safety and growth, we need to ask questions. What I have realized though, and maybe you can share your experience, is that most people really suck in asking questions. When I work with groups, it happens to me, and I became ruthless by now, that if I love question brainstorms, right? Okay, so ask as many questions as possible. And then there are questions that are, have you thought about doing X? And then I pause, I said, this is not a question. It's an advice hidden by a question mark. Please ask a question. What if you did Y? This is not a question. Have you heard about X? This is not a question. So the art of asking questions instead of giving advice or sharing feedback is maybe something that has to be learned first. It's a hard skill that maybe we have to promote more in our organizations in order to create the possibility of psychological safety.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. Modeling those small behaviors, no, that you were saying, like coaching people, like how they ask questions. There's a decision-making method, I don't know if you're familiar with, which is called integrative decision-making or consent. No, people confuse it. It's not consensus. And it has different stages. And one of the stages is when people make a recommendation, I want to make this decision. The first part is that people ask clarifying questions. It's not questions, it's clarifying. So I don't understand the proposal. Have you considered? So basically it's about getting information. And then there's a second round in which people react. Oh, this sounds crazy. We're going to lose our clients. I don't get it. No, but to your point, when people mix reactions into questions, no, either they are using the questions to share what they say versus saying it, or they are giving an idea or opinion versus asking a real question. So it's important to separate, no, both for sure.
Do you have time to step into the silos?
Yeah. Can we do that 1 second pause?
Can
we do a minute pause? Because my wife was calling me. She never calls me early in the morning. So.
Maybe to come back to an earlier paradox that you mentioned, the paradox of silos. And no, let me start this over again. If it seems to me that actually creating real psychological safety and this culture of challenging each other is so complex and starts at so many different levels. It seems as if it's best to start on a group level, on a small scale. So this means amongst peers that already share a common mindset. But then we risk to run into what's called silos that don't communicate with each other. So how can we solve this puzzle that on the one hand, we need smaller groups to create psychological safety, but if we have all these small groups that feel safe with each other, we're talking about silo organizations that don't function either.
Mm-hmm. Good point. First, we need to make a distinction because people get confused. I talk a lot about the power of subcultures. When people talk about culture, I think about the overall company culture, like if it was monolithic. first, yeah, it's important to design a company culture, but the company culture is also the result of the sum of all the subcultures that exist. So a silo is or silos are subcultures, but not all subcultures are silos.
Mm.
And this is a critical thing. When you crack that, then everything makes sense, hopefully. Why? We as human beings connect strongly and stronger to smaller groups. So if you think about your family, you have a strong connection that with your fellow country people or with the global population, right? And that happens at a team level. If I spend most of my time working with you and with 3-4 other people, which are the team member, and we participate in meetings, we share stuff, we work on Mira, blah, blah, that's our team. Most of the experience that I have of what the company is all about, it's how we work together, right? And even our leader, maybe it's not even feel as part of the team, because maybe we see our leader once a week or once every 2 weeks or even less, and remote teams sometimes every 3 weeks. So this subculture is really important. Of course, it needs to be connected to a larger culture, right? So if you have a purpose as an organization, all subcultures should be aligned in what's the larger purpose that we're trying to achieve. But then when it comes to how we want to work, collaborate, how we give each other feedback, how we want to meet, if we want to work on Mondays, Tuesday, Wednesday, remotely at the office or a mix, that should be decided by teams. And this is the tension what we're seeing now. Not only that, subcultures can be playing grounds for experimentation, can be maybe this team is working with one model, the other team with different model, and then we can learn and cross-fertilize how the people work. Or rather than a few people, 2 or 5 that are there at the top, very far away from the people that do the work, deciding what's best for them. That's what happened at Apple, I mentioned before. People rebelled, not because they want to, but because people were making a one-size-fits-all mandate for everyone to address work versus saying, okay, you guys run this, you other guys run the other project. Why don't you tell us, what have you learned 18 months into the pandemic working from home? What are the best practices that we can apply? And how can we start testing new ideas of how the future of hybrid work would look like versus coming from top down? The same happens at psychological safety. Think about, for example, the lead, like the SEALs teams, those military.
Navy SEAL?
The Navy SEALs, they're US Navy, they're very small units, and they're very trust because they're going to be making decisions on the go. They have their own way of doing things, and they're small. That's another creed of subculture. Small teams are more effective than teams of 20 people. A team of 20 is not a team. Teams are 5, 7 at the most, and that's the magic number. They need to trust each other to perform high-risk missions. And in that, when they're live, in the middle of action, there's no colonel or sergeant or general or whoever there to tell them, no, go there, go. The guys need to make their calls and they need to support each other. That's a extreme, but that's a great metaphor of how the same happens with a sport team. You're playing a soccer match or football or whatever, a group sport. You don't have the owner of the team going to the field and saying, hey, Miriam, kick that. You need to let them play. You hire them, you train them. When they're in the field, let the team play. So going back to the notion of psychological safety, it's easier to build psychological safety within a team that's on a mission, that's working on a particular project that's small, than doing it from top down. And actually, the definition of the psychological safety is something that affects the team, not the organization. But if you have lots of teams that are, sorry?
It can spill over, or to be effective, it needs to spill over.
Indeed.
Because how I imagine it now is that if we don't have psychological safety on an organizational level, then we end up in a silo structure where we might have safety or this team spirit in certain divisions or in certain subgroups, but these subgroups don't trust each other, so they don't communicate.
Yes and no, because if my team is safe, feels safe, and your team feels safe, we're going to start interacting. You know, it's like if you create islands, that then the islands cannot communicate. The problem with silos, they're not the consequence of lack of psychological safety or not. There are two things. First, that the people who run those divisions or teams on purposely wants to drive a goal to protect usually the manager. No, if I don't share information with my colleagues, if I don't do this, then I'm the only one who has all the power information, so people cannot fire me. But on the other hand, we're living in an era that everything's about cross collaboration. So every project demands people from different departments, right, to work together. But then the middle management is structured by departments. So if you run the sales department or the marketing department or operations or product or tech, your goals, your bonuses, your budget to hire people, whatever, are based on performance of your department. So the company is rewarding individual behaviors or department behaviors here, but then people that work in a project that come from all departments have a different goal. So that's where it's not aligned. So collaboration happens at the very top usually because there are few people, they know each other, they don't have an option to collaborate. They were chosen by the CEO, right? So that team normally needs to somehow work together. And then the people on the projects, they are smart, they want to grow, and they're working a great project. They're going to collaborate because they want to. Mm-hmm. Because they want the project to succeed. No one's going to boycott a project that they're a part of. But then the leaders of each people that come from different departments, they don't collaborate. The middle management usually doesn't collaborate because it's not designed by that. Their goals, so that's where the issue happens a lot. Then that turns into silos.
So is this then a problem of incentive mechanisms, or is that a structural problem that we have to get rid of middle management anyway?
Some organizations have, I mean, I don't think there's one single solution, but I think that middle management is a problem. Definitely, we need to move from to shift towards a reward system that basically rewards collaboration. So if you're the head of IT and your goals are all about what you achieve on IT, you're not going to care about working together. You know what I mean? So everyone's goals should be about it should be tied to group collaboration also.
So how can we do that?
Same at a team level. If you have individual bonuses, like most companies still have, people are not going to work together. They're going to do whatever is going to serve them best. If you say that, oh, there's a one single bonus that either everyone gets it or not, or maybe 70% of the bonus is about group results and only 30 about what you bring to the table individually, then people are going to collaborate. Mm-hmm. But then at a management level, middle management level, of course, there are certain processes that need to change and structure so people stop thinking about their department and start thinking they need to be more like service areas, no? For example, HR. Well, we need to decentralize hiring and promotion to the teams because they are the best suited to that. Many companies are actually giving teams the power to define their own salaries, not HR. And people say this is not going to work. Well, there's hundreds of examples that it works perfectly because when people are given the accountability and the freedom, they fix it.
And it's closer to the court where actually things happen. So they have a better understanding of what a fair compensation is, as opposed to HR that are usually further away from the business. They might know the industry averages, but they don't know what's happening on the floor in the court, however you want to call it.
And there are more biases. There's more like politics. The more you detach yourself from the core, the court. Yeah.
And then I wonder how to then bring it back to what you said earlier about moving it away from the leader. So if we agree that it's a problem, it's an intrinsic problem to middle management that there is a lack of communication because the incentive structures or reward system is just set in a way that doesn't incentivize them to collaborate more.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't this mean we're looking to the leader to change the reward system and to tell the middle managers to collaborate more?
On one hand, yes, but also I mean, when I work with middle management, I tell you guys, what are the so they also need to have ownership into this model is broken. Are you going to be part of the solution? Are you going to wait for someone to fix it for you? With team members, the same. If you're running a project that involves cross-department collaboration and the project is failing, not because of what the team members do, but because of the rules that get in the way, you as a team member or team members collectively need to raise, we need to change this, whatever. So going back to the idea of rebel as a grown-up, no, don't complain, say this is not working and come up with solutions. Chicken or egg? Well, but it's not a safe environment. Well, start asking questions and start bringing solutions. If you don't have the conversation, you're not going to move the needle.
And I think this is maybe where it becomes tricky to really break or to solve a broken system, because in your earlier example, and I loved it, it was the different middle managers who actually joined forces to go towards the CEO and say, okay, this is what we want to do. And if you're not doing it, then we all resign, because we are all being part of that. In a structure where we see silos, so all the middle managers, they're in charge of their teams. The teams can form an alliance and come towards their manager to ask for a change. But the middle manager who's actually competing with the others, where does he or she get the alliance for to actually change the system? So this becomes very lonely.
It's hard, but once again, no one says it's easy, but you want to build your career, you want to have a nice responsibility, good paying job. Well, like if you not work at a call center, well, and with all respect to people who are on call centers, what I'm saying is like people want to have the title, people want to have the salary, they want to have the large office, or I don't know, maybe it's a better internet connection now, the perk, because whatever you're gonna get as perks because of your position, but then they don't want to take the responsibility and saying, you know what, it's like growing a family. If you live alone, it's sometimes lonely, but it's easier. The moment you get a pet, you start getting responsibility because you have to feed the cat or the dog and take them out, whatever. The moment you get married or you have a couple living with you, then you have to start sharing things. If you have kids or you bring some in-law to live with you, things get more complicated and your responsibilities grow. It's a decision. So you cannot be a formal leader without that. And if you're not ready, well, then stay at that other level.
Yeah.
In many companies, people are promoted because they are good at doing something. No? So let's say you have a facilitator within your team that's doing a great job and people love it, clients love it. And then you say, well, now you're going to manage a group of 10 facilitators. Not everyone knows how to manage people. And even if they are trained and learned, some people are not good at that. And that's the point. Many people get promoted to positions because of their expertise and their results on an individual area, but then their job changes. They're no longer experts in marketing or IT. Now they have to lead, which is a different thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the outcome is that you basically screw up on two areas. You lose an expert and you get a bad manager.
Yeah.
By promoting.
Lose situation. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can we then break silos? How can we transform silos into subcultures that actually communicate and collaborate in a healthy manner?
I think that it works both ways. From a top-down approach or leadership standpoint, it's like, what are the clear rules that the company has to make sure that rules that what we reward or punish as a system doesn't affect that, to make sure that we have a clear purpose and values and those teams are aligned with that. And alignment comes from the senior leadership to the middle management to make sure that the teams are aligned. But then also giving the teams the freedom and accountability or responsibility to make decisions. No? And today is the perfect example. People want to work from home. They want to come to the office. Today is that's something that we need to give the teams the freedom to choose that, not the manager.
Mm.
The managers to say, you know what, these are the company goals, you deliver, how you do the work is up to the team, not up to individuals. It's up to specific teams to discuss and fix it and test it and see what happens.
Do you believe in hybrid?
I think that hybrid is coming. I have some struggles with the word. It's like in the car industry, hybrid vehicles are not a 4x4 or SUV are not a car. So there's no one thing. They're the worst of both worlds. I think that we need to talk about flexibility. That's the key word. No, we're putting a lot of energy into logistics and details, who works from where, blah, blah. We need to talk about what needs to be done, what's the type of work that's expected from people, and what are the best ways to get it done, no? Versus logistics and time zones and controls, and what people get stuck in details that are important to have some shared language. But most important is ask your team, what's your responsibility? What's the outcome? What's the work that this team needs to deliver? And how can we help you as a company to do the best work of your lives as a team?
Yeah. And I wonder to what extent the conversations about logistics and details is just an easy way out to keep ourselves busy. We can pretend that we're working on a solution, but actually the solution is complex, and we might have to confront ourselves to conflict, because some might want to work from home and others want to go back to the office. And in order to make sure that we don't have these difficult conversations, let's talk about Wi-Fi connections and on which days we're going to go to the office.
Yeah. But that's I mean, you are an expert in the field, but that's avoidance too. When that's avoidance.
Yes.
When you don't want to discuss the real issue, you know, it's like when people say, I'm busy. Well, you don't want to confront your problem. So you're just jumping from one thing to another. So companies are avoiding difficult conversations, more strategic conversations, by talking about minutia and logistics and little things, you know, like having CEOs of companies, instead of talking about the big picture, talking about, no, people are going to come Monday, Wednesday, and say, what? Are you office manager or are you the CEO of the company? Like, I mean, yeah. I hear lots of people asking questions, reflecting, what have you learned? What worked? What didn't work? You know, what are the new challenges? Like they're not changing their mindset. They're approaching a different challenge with the same mindset that they had before. The office was overhyped. I'm not saying no, it's important to have an office, but we need a different type of office, not an open space with people having their desk and doing work without talking to each other. No, we need to design more collaborative spaces. People are going to share desks, now, because they cannot have their space, and rather than taking all their decor and pets and little things that they used to have and pictures, well, that's gone for many people, and so how's it going to work?
Especially now that we have the opportunity actually to plan the next move. It's not that we'll be suddenly hybrid or suddenly back to the office. It's something that will happen gradually. So we have the opportunity to actually plan and think of the purpose and what might be the best solution or implementation for a specific context.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, at least when I'm here, a lot of people reach out, large corporation, and the approach is, no, we have a committee of people. I say, well, have you asked people? Are you decentralizing the process? No, we are asking. We fill in a survey. Like, this is not a survey. This is not asking people what are the expectations. First, because you're going to end with a lowest common denominator, no? because this team wants to do this team wants, and when we merge all the information, then it becomes like it's not going to work for anyone. But the model is not changing. I think that from a culture standpoint, how are we designing? You know, you mentioned back to the office, hybrid work, working from home. We need to, those are like boxes. We don't need boxes. We don't need a new model. It's not about, but the moment we say, what's our plan to go back to the office, you're immediately thinking in terms of versus how we're going to do work moving forward. What office do we need for what type of work now? What type of home environment we need for people, you know, and we start changing the conversation versus back to the office. That feels no, and people say, no, we shouldn't go. No, it's all remote. It's all high. They're fighting for positions versus to break the models and design a new one.
Exactly. And then instead of starting from a blank canvas, what have we learned from the pandemic? And what do we need? What are the best of both worlds that we want to bring together into a new world? And instead, everyone seems busy writing and asking about what hybrid means and how to implement hybrid. And this, sounds like avoidance.
Totally. You know, one of the key, I wrote about the key mindsets, but one of the most important mindsets that people need to change and let go of, we still think in terms of collaboration or work to be done in synchronous terms, that we all need to be present, regardless if it's virtual or not, right? It's not the office. It's a bigger problem that people, that's why people had so many Zoom calls, because they keep operating with we all need to be together, seeing each other to do work. And as you all know, you can start a brainstorm on a mural, but then people can continue working on their own in a collaborative tool.
Yes.
Sharing without having to be at the same time in the same space. But the workspace was designed not to be in the same place, was designed to be together at the same time. So when we moved to a virtual environment, they kept operating with, we need to be working together at the same time. And that's the biggest shift.
I think there's a real opportunity there, because when we move ourselves from this old mindset, as you said, that we have to be in the same place to collaborate synchronously, towards what else is possible, then we can detach, for instance, the brainstorming phase and the decision-making phase from the sense-making. So for brainstorming, we don't need to sit in the same room or to be in the same Zoom call. We need access to the same mural. Put your ideas there whenever you're ready. And then we can collectively make sense out of it. And then we can let it rest and take the decision another time, or even asynchronously via voting or whatsoever. And I'm sure that better decisions would come out, because it's not that you're approaching the end of the workshop and everyone is tired and hungry and just want this to end, and therefore might agree or not go the difficult route. So I think there is a potential to have more sustainable decisions and conversations when we think of collaboration as a mix between synchronous, as a hybrid between synchronous and asynchronous work.
Yeah. I think that maybe it's also, now that I'm hearing what you're saying, it's more of a continuum, synchronous, asynchronous. It's not a hybrid, means like I'm merging two things to create something versus understanding what mindset do we need. I mean, we were experimenting a lot with silent brainstormings, you know, even people are saying, and people are able to come up with in 5 minutes with so many ideas that then are shared and whatever. There are so many great things happening, you know? So I was also, one of the things I particularly struggle facilitating the most, because I struggled too. I made a lot of was with brainstormings. Yeah, my first brainstormings, I mean, months of facilitating brainstormings virtually, fully virtual, were really not good. And I was super disappointed. And at some point say, well, what can I change? Versus saying, brainstorming, people are telling me, are writing to me, you don't know, brainstormings, they need to happen in person all the time. Yes, but they're also good. And then by shifting certain practices and things, now brainstorming and wow, we're getting results in 20 minutes that are, oh my God, this is amazing, or 15 minutes.
So what have you learned, or what have you observed that doesn't work?
One thing that we get stuck a lot, and maybe people are going to say, this guy is crazy, but yeah, we're sure some, is the idea selection. That's the most critical thing. So I'm going to table that for a second. But first, the silent brainstorming before people share, that has changed everything. So not only you're neutralizing loud voices and that stuff, but also people. Then I ask people to share just one idea. Don't share all the ideas. Share what's the idea that you love the most, or the idea you're willing to lose your job, you're willing to die for. Well, that's it. And then sometimes I say, guys, we need to choose one. And sometimes I push them to choose one idea. We don't. I basically say, you know what? We spend too much time in debating whose ideas win, versus once we adopt as a team one idea, put the energy on fleshing it out. So sometimes I say, you know what, we're going to go with that idea because I think follow my gut, no? But then when we go into developing the idea and fleshing out and going through a structure, and everyone, because it doesn't feel it's Miriam's or whoever, it's everyone's, then the end result, it's not the idea that was selected, it's something else, but much better. And then it's where I feel the collective power. So making people choose ideas collectively, it's a pain in the butt, in person or remotely. So I learned to shortcut that. Brainstorming collectively, it's usually, I went to Stanford, this school, the design thinking, all that stuff. And I was trained to basically do a method that's great for extroverts. And people, not only extroverts, but also people like me that like to talk to think. While people that need to think to talk, they don't. So the silent thing has balanced that energy. Cut down the selection part, and then the magic of the group that can happen in person or can happen virtually is put the energy of the team into fleshing it out.
I love that.
That's what I'm doing, but
thank you.
Working a lot.
Thank you so much for pointing that out. I love it on so many levels. So I totally agree that the ability to use a whiteboard, a digital whiteboard, and have this silent brainstorm is just magic. I now think that we don't have to do this in the same room, but that's a different topic. And when you said that, okay, what is the one idea? You save the group from the risk again to avoid taking a stance and just get busy with insignificant discussions. I mean, the time we need to collectively cluster. And then what are we doing with the clusters? What do we learn? If there's nothing to learn from the clusters, then don't cluster. And finally, what you said about the one idea remind me of the Warren Buffett idea, process of prioritization. He says, write down 20 things that you want to do, and then group them, put them into order, and have the first 3 you're going to do, and the other 17 come on the avoid at all costs list. Because these 17 other things that you want to do will distract you to actually work on what's really important. So the real danger is, if I use kind of this idea, Warren Buffett idea for your selection of ideas and brainstormings, is by not focusing on this one idea, we avoid, distract, and lose energy and momentum instead of really going deep on what matters.
Yeah.
I love that.
We get caught in conversation. One thing that I struggle a lot is in the sharing. When people need to share an activity that they do in a breakout, they want to share everything. So I always tell them, like, not only I'm going to give you time, and when the time is out, you're out of space to share, but also I learned, because I usually tell them, you have 1 minute, 2 minutes. People don't know how to think in terms of time, because that's why we're bad at managing our times, because time slips. So I tell them, tell me in 1 word, tell me in 1 sentence, tell me in 1 paragraph. No, so that gives them a little bit of a. But I think also when I do a start, stop, continue, people work in 20,000 things. Share 2 post-its from each, or 1. No, so that has helped a lot. Make things easy, because people need to make choices. Sometimes they just share it. It's like a brainstorm. I mean, there's a lot of crappy shit. I don't want to know. Don't tell me the process. Tell me what's, once again, focus on the outcome.
Tell me the nugget.
Hybrid, flexible, asynchronous culture is more about the, don't tell me what you're doing, like status meetings. People get together to share what they're doing. I don't want to know what you're doing. Tell me where you are. What's the obstacle? What's preventing you from doing what you need to do? And how can I help you? That's it. The rest, I don't want to know. So I'm getting excited with this.
I totally share your excitement, and my neurons are just firing up, because I also got to realize why we're brainstorming in the first place. I think of Seth Godin's quote, "Good ideas come from bad ideas, as long as there are many." This means that we are brainstorming to just retrain our muscle to get as many bad ideas out, so that the one good idea can pop up.
Yeah.
So the rest is just collateral beauty that's actually not needed.
There's one thing I did once, I don't know, build on that is build an axis on mural or imaginary axis. On one hand, put a ego and impact. No. So say, when you choose an idea, do you want to choose an idea that's going to please your ego because you created, or because it's going to make you look good or whatever, or it's an idea that's going to create a big impact, going back to what's the problem we're trying to solve? No? That helps people, like, oh yeah, talking about psychological safety. Oh.
On the other hand, I wonder, I still think that the breakout session, and that's why I love the breakout session. So let them brainstorm in silence, and then let them blabber in their breakout sessions. Because I think there is a social bonding process of sharing your ideas. And if someone prefers to read out every single post that they have created, then let it be. But at least, as long as everyone gets to speak. But then coming back from the breakout and then being very precise, okay, in your breakout, what is the one idea that you want to push forward? And don't tell us all the details of your breakout discussion, because that's your bonding, safety, trusty, touchy-feely kind of space. That's yours. But after X minutes, you're thrown back out of it. And that's why I love online meetings. I think they're so much more effective because there's a clear timeline.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
What else? We cover everything you wanted.
It seemed like a abrupt stop suddenly.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last sticky note was used.
Yeah, exactly. We ran out of air. Oh, and no, good. Yeah, we went a little bit longer, but sorry for that.
I like that. It was on my bucket list to experiment with long form podcasting.
Okay, that's it.
Because I'm a big Joe Rogan fan, I must say, and I think that the first half hour of a conversation is always a little bumpy, because you might have ideas that you want to share, but you first need to get into the flow.
Yeah.
And then after an hour, you're in the flow, and then the time is up. But everything that comes after 1 hour is actually where suddenly you connect the dots and you explore different fields, and that's where the conversation then emerges.
That's flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel Pink gave an advice for writing that's marvelous. It's basically write an article, and then the first 3 or 4 paragraphs, get rid of them. Just don't read it. Just yeah.
Which is, yeah, same as with the brainstorming. And I always thought, okay, next time that I And then it's a fear of missing out, because I know that when I listen to a podcast, the first 15 minutes are usually not that good. So it's more important to listen to the last 15 minutes than the first 15 minutes. But I don't know anyone who would systematically start at minute 15 of a podcast, but I know many who would stop 15 minutes early.
Early, yeah. Cool. It's awesome. So it was great talking to you. Thank you.
Yes. If you have, what would be the nutshell for you? What would be, if someone fell asleep after minute 1, doesn't have time to listen to the entire show again, what would you like them to take away?
I think that one of the things that we discuss is stop thinking in binary terms. No, either we are safe, and until we're not safe, we can do something, or hybrid versus not hybrid. So we have all those many boxes that doesn't allow us to integrate concepts that seems contradictory and antagonist, but they're actually not. No? So rather than hybrid, need to be, maybe it's more integrative. No, something that will bring together different pieces versus creating conflict because they're different. No, integrating leaders need to shape culture, but also integrating people need to shape culture by asking questions. No? So it's not one or the other. It's not top down versus bottom up. It's not centralized versus decentralized. It's not the office, but it's integrative. Sorry, it's a long, but I think that's the key, breaking that polarity, binary terms.
Love it. Thank you.
Culture, not company culture, team culture. No, versus no, both. It's both. It's not one or the other. It's both.
Yeah. And we can have both.
We should, yeah.
Just it might be, it doesn't come without cost and without effort and maybe without risk.
Yeah, but going back to your point about fear, personal fear, no? Think about politics. The world here is super polarized, no? You're either a lefty or you're a right, and no. So it's like, okay, maybe these guys have some ideas that are great, and these guys have too. So by saying I belong to this side of the conversation, I'm basically avoiding that maybe some of what you're saying is right. Integrating polarities means that there are good things here and there are good things there, and stop seeing them as antagonists and integrate them into one thing. No?
Which brings us back to the topic of psychological safety, because we tend to polarize because it feels so safe to be with our little group. And then if we start listening to someone else, it's like a threat. It could put our beliefs at stake, our identity.
Indeed, but it's actually unsafe.
Yes.
No? Because safe is seeing that Miriam says that we need to do long brainstormings. Gustavo says that we need to do medium brainstormings, and someone else that we need to do short storm, and maybe a fourth member say, no, brainstormings don't work. And instead of saying it's one or the other, say, let's think about it. Or maybe we, by using an integrative process, we find the idea that, well, for certain projects, long brainstorming. For others, no brainstorming. For these, and you start playing around versus making one single choice.
And then we can make it our own.
Exactly.
It is always a gift and pleasure to talk to you, Gustavo.
Likewise, it was amazing. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. And
it takes two to tango.
And if anyone in the audience would like to hear more from you, check out episode 26 and check out Gustavo's website and blog and resources. Follow him on LinkedIn. I'll put all of that in the show notes. Join his community.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dum, 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 dum.